Briahna, what's on your radar?
Well, Robbie, today marks the first of 2 days of oral hearings that will establish whether Israel is guilty of genocide. Now, it's important that we're all working from the same definition of genocide. According to the Genocide Convention, genocide is a crime committed with the intent to destroy a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group in whole or in part. The $64,000 question is Israel guilty of this intent? Israel has denied the accusation of genocidal conduct via its Ministry of Foreign Affairs, saying that the accusation of genocide against Israel is not only wholly unfounded as a matter of fact and law, it is morally repugnant and anti-Semitic. Former Israeli Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked said the genocide allegations amounted to a blood libel, or an anti-Semitic trope that Jews drink the blood of Gentile babies. And President Herzog said, quote, "There's nothing more atrocious and preposterous than this claim." Domestically, Israel's defenders are making arguments like this one from Senator John Fetterman.
Who are they really fighting? It's a group of cowards. They hide in tunnels. They hide behind civilians. They attack, kill, and mutilate children, women, and they do that. Stop talking about proportion on that. They shot their best shot on October 7th, and they would have taken more lives if they couldn't do that, but they couldn't do it. And now let's also talk about that. Now we're talking about genocide, and now South Africa is bringing that kind of a trial. Maybe South Africa maybe ought to sit this one out when they're talking about criticizing behavior.
So far, the 84-page petition, which was filed by South Africa, has been joined by 16 other nations. The brief makes clear that genocidal intent can be inferred from the nature and conduct of Israel's military operation in Gaza. For example, by failing to provide or ensure essential food, water, medicine, fuel, shelter, and other humanitarian assistance for Gazans, by forcing the evacuation of 85% of the population from their homes, and killing over 21,000 people, including nearly 8,000 children. Of course, those numbers have grown in the weeks since South Africa's petition was filed. It also cites the mass murder of healthcare workers and journalists who are being killed at, quote, a rate significantly higher than has occurred in any conflict in the past 100 years. And reports of summary executions of unarmed people, including Israeli hostages, waving white flags. Of course, the intensity of the bombing campaign, which outstrips the bombing of Dresden in World War II, and which features so-called dumb heavy bombs with enormous blast radiuses being dropped in one of the most densely populated places in the world, those are also cited as evidence of genocide. If South Africa's petition is successful and it is able to meet the standard of showing that genocide is plausible, Israel, which is a signatory of the Genocide Convention, could be called upon to stop its siege of Gaza immediately. Now, whether or how international law would be enforced is a different question. As the New York Times noted, Israel completely ignored a 2004 non-binding opinion from the ICJ that security barriers in the West Bank were illegal and should be dismantled. They're still up. But certainly a finding from a binding international court that Israel has committed genocide would significantly increase the political pressure on Joe Biden to stop facilitating Israel's siege with American weapons and billions of dollars in military aid. The pressure is already mounting. Al Jazeera reported a shift in tone from Israel's prime minister as the ICJ hearings approached. Netanyahu put out a statement yesterday insisting that Israel has no intention of occupying Gaza. Note that forced mass displacement can be considered a genocidal act. However, it's important that you know that Bibi's recent statements are in direct contradiction with a number of statements from senior Israeli officials that are cited in South Africa's 84-page petition, statements that speak directly to the question of Israel's intent to ethnically cleanse Gaza. For example, on October 9th, Israel's defense minister declared a complete siege on Gaza, barring electricity, food, water, and fuel, on the grounds that Israel was fighting human animals. He went on to say that, quote, Gaza won't return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything. If it doesn't take one day, it will take a week. It will take weeks or even months. We will reach all places. President Herzog erased the distinction between militants and civilians, saying it's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved is absolutely not true. Israeli Minister for National Security Ben-Gvir said on November 10th, to be clear, when we say that Hamas should be destroyed, it also means those who celebrate, those who support, and those who hand out candy. They're all terrorists, and they should be destroyed. The Israeli Minister of Energy and Infrastructure tweeted that all the civilian population in Gaza is ordered to leave immediately. Israeli Minister of Heritage said after a month of bombardment, quote, the north of the Gaza Strip, more beautiful than ever. Everything is blown up and flattened, simply a pleasure for the eyes. We must talk about the day after, in my mind. We will hand over lots to all those who fought for Gaza over the years. That's him openly announcing an intent to parcel out Palestinian land to the soldiers who destroyed it. The Israeli Minister of Agriculture announced, quote, we are now actually rolling out the Gaza Nakba. Deputy Speaker of the Knesset and member of the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee said, now we all have one common goal, erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. Israeli Army reservist Major General Gloria Eland wrote, people should be told that they have two choices, to stay and to starve or to leave. He later told a newspaper that the only way to see the hostages alive again was to, quote, create a severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza. He's repeatedly called for Gaza to be made uninhabitable on social media, addressing the controversy around the Al-Shifa hospital bombing. He said, quote, I hope that the head of the CIA got an explanation of why this is necessary and why the U.S. must ultimately back even an operation like this, even if there are thousands of bodies of civilians in the streets afterward. These quotes go on for pages and pages and pages in South Africa's petition. Now, even if you discount these admissions, Israel's claim that it does not intend to permanently displace Gazans are undermined by the choice to destroy 60% of all housing stock in Gaza, including by conducting controlled demolitions. One might ask whether there's a real threat of Hamas hiding in a given building if soldiers have time to set charges, walk away a distance, and blow up a building while recording it for social media. The infrastructure and foundations of Palestinian life have also been deliberately targeted, according to the petition, including court buildings, legislative buildings, the public library, universities, Christian and Muslim religious sites, museums, and the Central Archive containing thousands of historical documents and national records. Moreover, reported plans to flood the tunnels of Gaza with seawater may have the effect of contaminating Gaza's aquifers and soil for the long term, undermining the ability to grow any crops there, literally salting the earth like medieval armies, making the land uninhabitable. Reports that Israel is in talks to export the Gazans to the Congo also don't exactly scream right of return. Now, the South African report also notes the consequences of Israel denying health care to Gaza, specifically citing 5 premature babies that were left to die and to decompose in an ICU, along with 40 kidney patients at Al-Shifa Hospital. Pregnant women are undergoing cesareans without anesthesia. Limbs are being amputated without pain meds. Over 1,000 children have lost either one or both legs. Infectious disease is spreading as there are hundreds of Palestinians per every remaining toilet, and sewage is running in the street. Even the dead aren't allowed to rest, as the South African report cites an allegation that Israeli bulldozers, quote, excavated and exhumed a hospital mass grave on December 16th, only to, quote, drag the bodies with bulldozers and then crush them. Now, after reading all this, John Kirby, Biden's National Security Council spokesman, says he's unpersuaded.
As you know, you dismissed a few days ago the case that brought by South Africa against Israel at the ICJ. Did you read the indictment? And if you did, do you believe that cutting off water, electricity, and fuel on a civilian population does not constitute a war crime by itself, nothing else?
Yes, I read the indictment, and as I said, and we stand by what we said about this. We find it without merit. We find it counterproductive, and I'll leave it there.
Now, if South Africa wins before the ICJ, it could lead to Israel being enjoined from conducting further genocidal acts. But that injunction would be temporary. The next step would be a trial process that could take years. Now, America has a long record of dodging accountability on the international stage. As journalist Abby Martin noted, America is so adverse to accountability that George Bush passed a law known as the Hague Invasion Act, which would allow the U.S. to invade the Netherlands to prevent America from being charged with war crimes. With no way to enforce the ICJ's decision, it's worth noting domestic efforts to force Biden to end his support for Israel's siege, which could not continue without U.S. support. Bernie Sanders has invoked Section 502B of the Foreign Assistance Act, which would force a Senate vote on whether Israel has violated the human rights of Gazans. If the vote passes, the State Department would be forced to investigate abuses, and Congress would then vote on whether to block military aid as a result of those findings. Are there 50 Congress members who would do the bare minimum of voting for merely an investigation into alleged abuses committed by a country to which we've sent an unprecedented amount of aid? Now, I'd argue that this is where domestic political pressure should really turn. Congress members should be asked about their willingness to merely investigate Israeli war crimes at town halls, and presidential candidates on both sides of the aisle should be asked to weigh in. And this is why journalism is so important. If senators are never asked to defend their votes, they will be able to vote with impunity, ignoring that 60% of Americans want a ceasefire. Accountability requires that there be some awareness of what could be done. Will you vote to re-elect your Congress member if they vote down a mere investigation into Israeli war crimes while voting in favor of increased funding to a country accused of genocide? So these are the stakes before us. The hearing started being live streamed very, very early this morning at regular morning time in Europe. And already you're seeing clips of the South African petitioner making the case, citing a lot of the evidence that I included in this radar, and really interestingly using many TikToks from Israeli soldiers that they posted voluntarily to prove the point about intent and about the relationship between the statements coming from senior members of the Israeli government and the behavior of the army as they conduct the siege.
Do you think calls from South African politicians to kill the Boers, kill the white people, are genocidal statements?
So there are a couple of things there. Under international law, an occupied people has the right to resist, including violently. And if you are the occupier, you have an obligation to provide basic needs for the community that you're occupying, so food, water, shelter, et cetera. That's part of why this charge of collective punishment is such a serious one. Secondly, Israel has made the argument that Hamas are the real people who have violated international law, and they should bring this petition, and they have every right to do so. But the question is, under the Genocide Convention, to which Israel and the United States and Palestine are all signatories, there is an obligation for all of the signatories to play a role in not just condemning genocide, but stepping in and preventing genocides from happening. So that's what's going on right now. Hamas has not killed it has killed soldiers in the purpose of this war, but it has not killed any additional Israeli civilians since October 7th. And so the question is, what are you enjoining Hamas from doing? On the other side of things, you have over 23,000 people now that have been killed, and many more stand to die because of the hygiene and sanitary situation in Gaza, with disease spreading quite widely, most people living in tents, millions of people unhoused, and an entire country destroyed from an infrastructural perspective. And the question is, what is the obligation of all the signatories of the Genocide Convention to force Israel to stop the ongoing actions that are happening right now?
I guess if international law is only capable of preventing the victims of a terrorist attack from wiping out the perpetrators of that, some people will ask, should international law be followed or have some kind of validity if it only constrains the regular state actors and does nothing or can do nothing to prevent the kind of terrorism that Hamas engages in and that a majority of the people in Gaza support? What good is it?
So I think that if Palestinians were killing tens of thousands of Israelis over the course of the last few months, not only will we have seen mass international condemnation, which, by the way, the South African petition does unequivocally condemn the acts of Hamas on October 7th. We would have seen American troops and American money committed even more than has already been done.
Which I don't want to see, by the way. I think
defending
we should
Israel.
not.
So this is a counterfactual that I think whether the situation were reversed and there were tens of thousands of Israelis being killed by Palestinians, absolutely the international community would have risen to their defense, the same way that we send more money to Israel than any other country in the world, precisely for the Iron Dome and to prevent that exact thing from happening. But your question there, Robbie, seems to imply that all of the people of Gaza are, in fact, legitimate victims, legitimate targets for Israel. What you said there, the question that you asked...
I did not say that.
You specifically just asked...
I don't think that.
Is the international law appropriate? Is international law good and meaningful and something we should support if it only constrains Israel from wiping out the targets? The argument that the ICJ, that South Africa is making before the ICJ, that Israel is not wiping out the targets, that its statements clearly show an intent to wipe out all of Gaza, to eliminate all of the housing in Gaza, to make it so that no one can grow crops or drink water in Gaza ever again, to parcel off the land of Gaza to the soldiers in Israel, to ship people from Gaza to Congo or at the very least to Egypt, and to ethnically cleanse the population so there is no longer a population of 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza. That's the allegation, and that's the violation of international law.
Well, we will continue to follow those developments, and we'll have more rising right after this.